Hello, I'm journalist and comedian James Mullinger. 6 years ago, I left London, England and moved to St. John, New Brunswick. Since then, my stand-up career has taken me to just about every town and city in Atlantic Canada, which, let's face it, has provided plenty of material. But I've also come to realise that this place is special and, crucially, underappreciated. So my wife Pam and I started a magazine, the Maritime Edit, to celebrate its natural beauty and the incredible spirit of the people here. But now, I'm embarking on a tour to meet some of Atlantic Canada's most interesting and dynamic people and chat with them about what drives and inspires them and hear what they love so much about this place that we're all so proud to call home. Today I'm heading to Newfoundland and Labrador to meet the queen of Canadian comedy, Mary Walsh. Best known as a co-creator and star of one of the most successful and longest-running comedy series in Canadian history, This Hour Has 22 Minutes, she's had a decades-long career as a comedian and actress, a best-selling author, and as a philanthropist and activist. She's won every major award a Canadian can win, including an incredible 18 Gemini Awards and a Governor-General's Performing Arts Award. I'm meeting Mary at her home in downtown St. John's to discuss her love for Newfoundland and Labrador, her career highlights, and how she overcame personal difficulties to become one of the funniest voices in the country. I'm James Mullinger, and this is Atlantic Edition. I'm driving into downtown St. John's now to meet one of my favourite comedians anywhere in the world, the one and only Mary Walsh. She's obviously known for her love of her home province and her incredible mind and sharp wit, but there's just so much more to her story, including a difficult home life growing up and her own early struggles with alcoholism. I'm looking forward to hearing how she overcame both to create one of the most successful television shows in Canadian history. As a relative newcomer to the region, I'm excited to learn how she has managed to stay at the top of her game for more than 3 decades in this crazy industry and what it is that drives her to keep producing comedy gold while also lending her voice to causes that clearly mean so much to her. Here we go. Mary!
Hey, James, how are you?
I'm good.
Sit down.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
It is so lovely to see you.
And nice to see you, too.
And I have to say, I'd like to start by saying that I'm extremely honoured to be sat here with the queen of Canadian comedy.
Ah.
This is a big moment for me.
Yeah.
That must have a lot of... that must add a bit of stress to your life, having that title all of the time.
No, it doesn't actually, because so few people ever say it. But thank you for saying it, James, and it means a lot to me. No, it's not, unless they do... do you think they might do a series called The Crown about the Queen of Canadian Comedy? That would be good. Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to start there. Like, when you were studying at Ryerson, was that a difficult decision to drop out and pursue comedy? And how did that decision come about?
Well, I was just talking to this, actually, I have to go back, because when I was 18, I got a job on the CBC. I was depressed. I had failed at everything, including even, working at the arcade. And I was going to marry an American, and I went down to Colorado with him, and his family really didn't like me. Of course, I drank quite a lot when I was there, which didn't really make me that charming, I have to say. And I was lying on the couch one day watching Coronation Street in the afternoon, and it came on that they needed a summer replacement announce operator to do the show called Summer Magazine on CBC. And May and I lived on Henry Street, and CBC was just across the street. And I went down and did it, and I was so secure in the knowledge that I would never get it, that I was completely relaxed and got the job. Then when I was on the air, really doing a bad job, the only letter we ever got that whole summer was somebody writing to say, "Who is the mad giggler?" on from 10 to 11. person. You know that kind of laughing that you do when you're really nervous, and that's all I did. I was very nervous. And I had gotten into Ryerson, into the theater company there, and you weren't allowed to work in the theater if you were studying theater.
Wow.
Because, you know,
that would make far too much
of course,
sense.
that would be so bad. But you might pick up bad habits or something. And I don't know, I just found the whole thing boring, I guess.
And you mentioned, obviously, being a woman in comedy at a time, of course, when it was even harder than it is now. And even now, of course, we still have a very long way to go, and female comedians are still being patronized when they come off stage by male audience members saying, I don't normally like female comedians, but I like you, and all these stupid things that only men would say.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. Like,
yes,
as women as object, as opposed to, and we see ourselves that way because we've always been brought up that way.
Yeah.
So as we get older, at last, we stop trying to be the object of somebody else's desire and start to become the subject of our own lives, which is such a relief. But as a young woman, that's why I always played old women, because you could get to be yourself somehow. Whereas as a young woman, you're always trying to be something, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
And so it's hard to be funny, isn't it? I mean, or I found it hard to be funny. Anyway,
no, but it's true, you can see it, the male gaze almost disallows a female comedian to look good while she's being funny.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
But, I mean, for you at that time, I mean, essentially pioneering as a female comedian before there was even kind of conversation about it.
But you have to remember, I grew up watching Mary Tyler Moore with Betty White, Cloris Leachman, like the funniest stuff on TV. Carol Burnett was on when I was growing up. Phyllis Diller. I mean, there were, people go, oh, this is a brand new age of, but it's not like we just came fresh from the womb this second. Women have been around forever. It's like, people are going, women, isn't that interesting? Let's view some women then. But, I grew up watching TV where there were women who were funny.
Right.
And my mother was terribly funny. And of course, let's not forget Andrea Martin and Catherine O'Hara, who were on just before us, right? Yeah. But I'm just trying to say that it wasn't like I was I didn't feel like I was a pioneer. What really was pioneering, I think, is like you say, Andy and Greg and Bob and Tommy, who were the 4 male members of Codco, and then there was me and Diane and Kathy, and the men were allowed to be competitive, and it was outward, and they did it, and there was no shame. But we were highly competitive too, but we were so ashamed of it. We were always trying to pretend that we weren't, going, and so you would have to play these little games like, oh, that's really good what Kathy's doing, but maybe it'll be, you know what I mean? As opposed to going, I want to be part of that, right? Which the boys seem to have that freedom to, like, in men, competition is seen as being good, whereas in women it is seen as being,
she's an angry woman,
a bitch,
So how did This Hour's 22 Minutes get to air, and then when did you know that it was going to be such a huge success?
And I remember I sat down in a Czechoslovakian restaurant with Michael Donovan, and I said, I had this idea, that I want to do this show that's like the news, and we just make fun of the news, and we make fun of how the news, I had the idea that we do all these different sets. We make fun of how the news is done. And he said, isn't that interesting, because that's what CBC is looking for, something just like that now. And then I said, I think I'd already asked. I'd gone to Kathy, and she said, look, I'm not even interested in the news. It makes me depressed. And I went, that will be great, because you'll bring a whole other thing to it. And I went to Andy, who said yes at first, and then said no, he didn't want to do a weekly show, Andy Jones. And then I went to Greg Toomey, and Toomey said yes. And then I went to Rick Mercer, and he and Gerald Lunds had just done a show about someone who had said some bad things about Newfoundlanders, and they'd had enormous success, and they'd travel across the country. And so it started, and I went in the hospital almost immediately to have back surgery. So I watched the first show of This Hour is 22 Minutes from my bed. We did 6 at first, and then they immediately wanted 6 more. And so we knew that it was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously people must have been kind of coming up to you in the street prior to this about Codco and everything else, but did this kind of introduce a whole different kind of level of recognition?
Yeah, we did. Those first few years were very, very popular, and I was on the cover of Maclean's, and I remember thinking, oh, the cover of Maclean's, what odds? And I'll never get on the cover of Time. Ambition, blind ambition, not able to enjoy anything.
Yeah.
Terrible, terrible, terrible. Anyway, there you go. I was caught up in that. Yeah.
And when you did, could you ever have imagined then that it was, or maybe with the youthful arrogance you did, but could you have imagined then that it would still be such a huge success now and still?
No, I mean, I left year 12, which seemed immensely long to me.
Right.
And I remember saying to someone else, they were very worried about. I was on the Republic of Doyle, I guess, and they were very worried about something, and I said, oh, relax. It all works itself out by season 9, right? And they went, yeah, if we ever get to season 9.
One thing you mentioned there, I mean, I love the fact that the humour that you've done since the very beginning has always had, politically sound messages behind it, whether it be environmental issues, political issues, social issues.
Yeah.
And in recent years, you've obviously become far more, even more vocal and outspoken in supporting human rights issues. Why is that so important to you, and how do you find it using your voice to kind of make those things known about?
I don't know. I'm from the working class. In our family, generally, there was that kind of bad-tempered working class notion that things had better straighten out, and that the people in charge and don't take orders from anyone, and who put the fucking boss's cap on you?
Right.
Yeah.
So that must have given you the confidence to perform some of your sketches, and that kind of not necessarily anti-authority idea, but the concept of what makes you think you can tell everyone what to do, especially when they're doing bad things.
I know, and I never thought that I could. I thought Marg could. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Marg is a different person than me. She's an older woman. She's got a lot more experience. Yeah. She's a lot more comfortable in the world, and all she's doing is trying to help them to get to where they need to go. I realized that very soon as I was playing Marg, and you're so close to people, you always have to play it from the helping angle. Even when you're saying the worst things, it's like, I'm just here and I'm telling you, you can't keep going, hating everything. You've got to love something, you know what I mean?
Laugh, let the country hear you laugh like you got a pair.
I wonder, is there any chance at all of getting a kiss off you? I mean, you are the prince.
We've upped our political standards and we say to them, up yours.
Mr. Watt, good to see you. Keith! Meg, are any of the Rolling Stones boiking the Prime Minister's wife this time? Could you just answer it for the Canadian public?
Go ahead. Embrace me. Practice on me.
Well, of all of them, do you have a favourite Marg moment?
One of my favorite Marg moments was when we went after Ralph Klein and now this was pre 9/11, right? And so we went out to Edmonton, and all the security guards said was, shut the door, we're not eating Edmonton. And I had gone as Marg, but in a different costume, in a cowgirl outfit. And I had 2 6 guns, the ones with caps in them, on my thing. So we go in, and we're going to ambush Ralph, and Jeff just said, didn't make much of it, but he said, for God's sake, don't shoot off the gun. And so we get there. Ralph just put me on. I don't know what he did, but I got completely lost. Totally lost. So I immediately reached for my guns and started banging them off in the legislature, which really caused them. And that's one of the things I always go, don't have guns around, because if you get in a bad situation, you will fucking use it, right? No, seriously. Because it's a big,
That's the gun control argument right there.
And we got into a lot of trouble. I always loved John Chrétien, because, of course, you could feel somewhat comfortable with John Chrétien because he was so funny. And he's such a funny guy, and he's so relaxed within himself. He is who he is, you know what I mean? He doesn't care.
Right.
grabbing that guy. And,
Yeah, and he's
you know,
comfortable in himself. What do you think it was about your upbringing that kind of gave you your comedic sensibility?
Well, like I said, everybody in my family is funny, which I would say that Newfoundlanders do have that kind of comedic, skewed way of looking at things. So I got that. I just was luckily enough, born into it. I was the unfunniest. Like, I didn't grow up with my family. I grew up next door with my two maiden aunts. Oh, actually, one maiden aunt, an aunt who had been married and whose husband died when they were just married a year, and with my uncle. And they lived at number 9 Carter's Hill, and my family, until I was 11, lived at number 7. So it was weird.
Yeah.
It was just weird. Then when I was 11, they moved around the bay to Mom's mother's house. And then Mom and Dad came and got me when I was about 12, and I went and spent a week there. And it was a big change in my life. From being the nun's favorite, because, you know, having been brought up by 2 old ladies and an older man, so I was always asked to give when the teachers came, I gave the speech, and I was our principal's favorite, and I was also our teacher's favorite, you know. And then when I went and spent that couple of weeks with my family, I became a different person, and I just went off the rails a bit. I'm not blaming my family, but I wanted to be with them. You know, they were my real family. That's what I wanted to be like. I didn't want to be like Miss Precocious and Goody Two-Shoes.
Yeah, you wanted to embrace the chaos.
I wanted to embrace the chaos as best I could to get in with them, you know.
Yeah.
Which didn't work, of course. But anyway, never mind. But, you know, so then I went down a road that, you know, lots of people go down, like that kind of, you know, drinking and smoking and getting in with a hard crowd and stuff. They don't all stay on it, but I, unfortunately, on both sides of our family, we have the disease of addiction and alcoholism, and it just goes on and on and on and on. Though I do have a brother who got sober when Mom died. On the day that Mom was buried, my brother got sober, and his family seems to be fine. Right. You know what I mean?
Were you functioning alcoholic, or were you kind of a chaos alcoholic?
Well, you know, I guess I was a functioning alcoholic because I kept working and stuff like that. I hadn't gotten to that other place yet, as they often say, people who talk about alcoholism. Yeah. I hadn't lost my job yet. I hadn't lost my family yet.
It was all in the post.
Yeah. So, you know, luckily, I got sober.
Right.
And
had you known for a while that it was a problem?
Oh my God,
or were you
yes. I knew that it was a problem, but there didn't seem to be any choice.
Right.
Which is the big thing that you learn when you get sober, is that there is always a choice.
Right.
Might be the wrong choice, might be the best choice, but there is a choice. Whereas I felt I had no choice. It seemed to be the only option open to me, right? That drinking thing, that was my best friend and my favorite companion, and yet it was killing me, you know, and making everything dark and ugly. It was like being in a dark hole and keeping on digging because you thought this was the way out, whereas if you just looked up for 2 seconds, you could see, you know, that there was a way out, and I didn't know that. And I finally, you know, realized that, or I didn't realize it. Took years to kind of, you know, but I did begin to see a slight light at the end of the tunnel. Wow. You know.
And can you describe the moment that you started to really see the light when you got sober and realized that you'd been kind of ignoring this
It's
option?
been very, very. I'm a very slow learner, so it's been very, very. Like my son was 3. On the day that I decided to stop drinking. And it happened right there on those stairs where he's sitting now. And it was one of the saddest days of my life. And yet within months, when I was going to bed at night with a pot of tea, and my son was asleep in the next room, and the extraordinary joy that I would feel knowing that I was there, that I was actually there, and I had no idea of the amount of guilt that I'd been carrying around all this time. Sometimes you don't know the weight that you're carrying until it's gone, and and it was like a rising up.
That's it. It's a beautiful moment. Must have must have kind of changed the way that you were as a mother and enjoyed those years, because those are the best years, 3 onwards.
But then I became a workaholic after that, because I thought, what am I going to do? I have nothing in my life.
That's a better aholic to be, though. If you're going to be a
But
holic.
still, it's hard on people around you.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you are singularly focused and you become, it's not easy. All those aholisms are escapes from real life. And to be able to embrace life as it actually is, that's what we're all doing here, right? Yeah. And so we try a lot of stuff to get out. Yeah. And then you realize, this dank, dark hole I've been digging for myself, it's actually quite glorious out here.
Yeah. I don't need to be down here, I can be out there.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a joy, and all I can say is, you may have not made the cover of Time magazine, but I do have the proof that you are the queen of comedy, because it says it right here.
Oh, good.
In the Maritime Edit. That's an absolute fact, queen of comedy. I mean, wow, what a view. How do you feel as a proud Newfoundlander when you look at that glorious view?
Well, I am really, really happy that it's there. Back in the 70s, of course, they were just going to wipe the whole thing out. Urban renewal, just knock down all the places that the poor lived in the hopes of social engineering, the poor would magically disappear. Now, all the places that people want to see when they come to St. John's, all that Jelly Bean Row and all that stuff, that was stuff that they just wanted gone. And we did a show called What Do You Want to See the Harbour For? And I think one of the lines was, the hills are high, the harbour is deep, put them both together, you got a parking lot. Because parking lots were big, but it's glorious.
It's magical, and I mean, to have a space like the rooms here, which is the very kind of epitome of creativity in all of its forms. What's it like having a place like this for people to come and create?
Well, I know Mary Pratt, who's a brilliant painter, who's gone tragically from us now. But Mary fought very hard for the rooms and very hard for it to be here, because this was the site of Fort Townsend. But I think everybody's really pleased with the rooms and how brilliantly it turned out, and what an extraordinary view, and it's fantastic. Yeah.
What do you think it is about Newfoundland that kind of brings about so much creativity, whether it be artists, comedians, actors, painters, where do they all come from, and what is it about here?
I know, it's interesting, isn't it? But I always think it's because we were a country and we are an island. And so we had to create everything ourselves, right? Everything had to be, we were cut off and we were a country. So we had our own singers and our own stories and our own, right? Yeah, so I think that might have something to do with it, right? We're used to creating our own work in order to feed ourselves, culturally. And
yeah. And I mean, when you've obviously traveled the world performing and in every capacity, but you always kind of come back here. What is it about Newfoundland Pride for you?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? They say that old John Crosby used to be the member, that his grandfather had on his tombstone that in heaven you always knew who the Newfoundlanders were, because they were always saying, when can I go home?
That's beautiful. That's absolutely true.
Yeah. I don't know, and we're just lucky, that in the 19th century and the 18th, people had that sense of place, right? Breathes there a man with soul so dead who never to himself has said, this is my home, my native land. Yeah. People don't feel like that anymore, but we do. So it's an extra little bit of love that we get to have, you know? Yeah.
And I think that's why people globally love Newfoundlanders so much. I mean, what advice would you give to an Atlantic Canadian comedian starting out now?
My advice always is, form a troupe. People always want to do stand-up comedy, but Rick Mercer had his own TV show. Mark Critch is now the star of This Hour is 22 Minutes. We had a TV show. If you want to get a broad thing, you have to have, I think, a company. And so start a sketch comedy. Johnny Harris is on stand. They had the Newfoundland Dance Party. Rick had his own, they had a very funny Corey and Wade's Playhouse. Yeah, so if you, in Atlantic Canada particularly, you've got to get together with a crowd and start a sketch comedy.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for an incredibly inspiring day, an uplifting day, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your insights and your
James,
story.
I've had such fun, and what a great crowd you've got with you, and
Well, I feel closer to you than ever, and I feel closer to Newfoundland and Labrador than ever, so thank you.
thank you so much, James. It's been wonderful. Thank you.